good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. We're extremely grateful that you've given us the gift of your time this afternoon to be a part of this session. As I indicated, I am Dr. Sandra McDonald. I am the Healthcare Quality and Wellness Manager here at NHI, and I'll be your facilitator this afternoon for this afternoon educational session. I'm joined by my colleague, Mrs. Chandra Sawyer, our health and wellness specialist, who you'll be hearing from later on in the session. So on behalf of the board of directors and the leadership team and the hardworking associates here at the authority, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this afternoon's session, which is our monthly educational sessions. And during this session this afternoon, we'll be focusing on the prevalence of alcoholism in the Bahamas. And our speaker for this afternoon is Dr. Lookie. You'll be hearing from her later on in the session. As always, this session is designed with you, the Bahamian public, in mind. And our goal for this session is to create an awareness and an understanding of the impact of alcoholism in our country, and to keep you informed of the challenges that individuals face who use alcohol. So before Dr. Lookie begins her discussion or presentation this afternoon, I want to provide you with a brief overview of the authority, who we are, what is our mission and vision statement, and what is our focus. And then finally, I'll be talking to you about where we are in our journey to universal health care. So from the authority perspective, our mission and vision, our vision first is to lead the way in providing affordable and accessible quality healthcare to all Bahamians, because we know Bahamians are deserving of quality care. And our mission is to transform the current healthcare system in the country, because we understand that the future of our country, the future well-being of our country, and the future well-being of Bahamians depend on the health of our nation. We want to ensure that patients are at the center of the care that we're providing, and that they're at the center of the decisions that we're making about their care, and they're actively involved in participating in their care, in the care that we're providing. How do we do this? We demonstrate our commitment to achieving our mission and our visions by making sure that we're passionate about the care that we're providing, and our focus on ensuring that we're providing universal health care for all Bahamians. We want to be progressive in expanding the quality care throughout the Bahamian public, ensuring that we have the solution necessary to the problems we face in healthcare and supporting it by technology, the technology that we provide, which is extremely progressive. We want to make sure that we're creating partnerships with our stakeholders, and that together we're working to provide quality and affordable and accessible care to all Bahamians. Then we also demonstrate this by showing our integrity to the program and our commitment to you as the Bahamian public. We want to be accountable and transparent and sincere about the services that we're providing. And then finally, we want to provide care to you or to the Bahamian public, offering the respect that we know Bahamians deserve, and making sure that the services that we're providing is being provided in a respectful manner. Some of our focus, the focus of the program here at NHI, we want to make sure that as a part of the whole focus on health and wellness, and as we develop a national health and wellness program, that we're committed to creating platforms to educate and inform Bahamians and encourage you to adapt and embrace a healthy lifestyles. Understanding that it's important that we focus on things like the social decisions we make, the personal decisions that we make, that they all impact the quality of care or the quality of lifestyle that we live. We can't just live recklessly or make really bad decisions and expect to have good health outcomes. We want to make sure that we understand that, or Bahamians understand the importance of exercising regularly, that they're eating healthy, then understand that food is as medicine, and making sure that you're actively focusing on developing a balanced meal or eating a balanced meal. We want to also make sure that self-care becomes very important, that you're focusing on your mental and emotional health, because those are some of the things that impact healthcare. And that we're also focusing on balancing life and lifestyles, like stress. What are we doing about eliminating those things in our lives that cause us to be stressed out? And because stress has a direct impact on the quality of life we live, as well as the quality of care that the quality of lifestyle that we're living based on our stressful environments, whether we're in a stressful environment or not. And so I'm going to now talk about where we are as an authority and as an agency. So over the last 5 years, NHI has made significant impact in ensuring that Bahamians are provided quality care, and that we're leading the way in transforming healthcare in the country. A few of our milestones: we've been successful in terms of engaging technology, making sure that the services that we're providing to Bahamians are consistent with the technological trends around the world, and by engaging and using the electronic health record and making sure that, particularly in a COVID environment, you still have access to your physician through telehealth. And so those are some of the technological advances that we've made in an agency. As an agency, I think the authority is one of the most technologically advanced agency or even ministries, I would dare to say, in the country, because we're currently on the cutting edge of the technology that we're using. We're currently focusing on growing the program. Today, we have about 123,000 beneficiaries enrolled in the program here at the authority. And we continue to enroll individuals on an ongoing basis, on a daily basis, to make sure that ultimately all Bahamians are a part of the program. We're making sure that the population that we're serving is just not based on Nassau, that we're focusing on the entire the Bahamas. So currently we have beneficiaries from about 17 islands altogether. We have about 5,700 children enrolled in the program, and about 14,000 seniors. So as we move forward and the program continues to grow, our ultimate goal is to have every Bahamian involved or enrolled in the program. The next approach to what we're doing here at the authority is we're expanding our provider. There yet in terms of providing specialist services, but we ultimately, I think, get there. So initially now we have about 104 physicians in the program, and then we have about 57 primary care facilities and 14 labs. Our goal ultimately is to make sure that we have most of the facilities in country a part of the program. How else do we demonstrate success from this program? You tell us as beneficiaries and as the Bahamian public, you tell us exactly how we're performing, because on an annual basis, we've been completing beneficiary experience surveys. And in our last survey, this was run in 2001, which was last year, 96% of you who were surveyed indicated to us that you were very satisfied, extremely satisfied with the services and that we provide, and you're pretty happy with the program. So again, that gives you an overview of who we are, where we are, and and what we hope to do going forward as we focus on universal healthcare in the country. And again, I want to thank you for being a part of the program this afternoon. I'm going to now turn the program over to Mrs. Chandra Sawyer, who will introduce our speaker for this afternoon. And as we go through that process, I encourage you, if you have questions, to please put them in the chat, so we'll address your questions at the end of the presentation, before we wrap the presentation of this afternoon. So thank you so much, Chandra.
Good evening, everyone. Alcohol Awareness Month is observed globally during the month of April. According to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, alcoholism is defined as a chronic, progressive, potentially fatal disorder marked by excessive and usually compulsive drinking of alcohol, leading to psychological and physical dependence or addiction. In 2017, the National Anti-Drug Secretariat conducted the Bahamas National Wholesale Drug Prevalence Survey, which revealed that alcohol was the most popular drug used among the population surveyed. In this survey, the following statistics with respect to gender and age were revealed. Males between the ages of 12 to 24 commonly use alcohol at a rate of 59.9% and females at 60.9%. Males between the ages of 25 to 44 prevalently used alcohol at a rate of 85.1% and females at a rate of 76.3%. And males between the ages of 45 and 65 years prevalently use alcohol at a rate of 83.9% and females at a rate of 71.3%. The statistics and the daily scenarios of alcohol use in our country speaks volumes to the need for alcohol awareness and intervention amongst our population. Tonight's presentation is intended to steer us in the direction so that we can help our loved ones and even ourselves overcome this social issue. Our speaker for this evening is Dr. Novia Carter Lookie, and she serves as the immediate past chairperson of the National Child Protection Council for the Ministry of Social Services and Urban Development. She is the proud mother of 3 sons, and she also serves as the clinic director of the Children Advocacy Clinic at the Bahamas Crisis Center. As a school psychologist, Dr. Carter is a scholar practitioner who believes in the importance of empowering young persons. Her lifelong mantra is aligned with Michelangelo's famous quote, "I saw the angel in the marble and carved it until I set him free." As such, she continues her service to the education system, working as an adjunct professor at the University of the Bahamas. As an educator and psychologist, Dr. Carter Lookie serves as an agent of change and a child advocate in her community. This evening, we would like to take this time to welcome Dr. Novia Carter Lookie to present. And as Dr. McDonald stated, we will be allotting a few minutes after her presentation for question and answer. So during the presentation, feel free to place your questions in the chat, and we will read those questions to Dr. Lookie. Dr. Lookie, you are on.
All right, thank you. Next slide. Pleasant good afternoon to you all. Next slide. A grandmother sits, next slide. A grandmother sits on her porch. And as she sits on the porch, it's almost as if she's in between 2 different worlds. She looks at the world where the kids are inside the house, and she looks at the world outside her house, which represents the road. As she looks at her kids in the house, she realized that between in the house and on the road are 4 generations of Bahamians. So she takes a closer look at her children. She watches her granddaughter prepare a mixture, a little brandy drink for the baby who has a cold on the chest. And so she watched the mother put the little brandy inside the bottle and gives it to the baby because that brandy will make the baby feel better. As she sits on the porch and she continues to watch, she then watches another daughter give her 14-year-old child, just taste a little bit, just get a little sip. And then Grammy continues to watch. And this time, because remember now, she has a panoramic view. And so this time now, Grammy looks at her son outside, who's slumped up on the wall outside, completely drunk, just leaning up on the wall, hoping to breathe. And finally, Grammy looks at her own husband, her husband who walks quite sprightly in the house at 85 years of age, and he himself only takes a drink occasionally. And so Grammy has one question that dominates her entire mind as she once again looks at 4 generations of her children. How does alcohol affect families, communities, people, and ultimately, how has alcoholism impacted the Bahamas? So here we go. The national survey conducted by the National Drug Secretariat indicate that alcohol is the #1 drug used in the Bahamas. The interesting thing about it is the way adults use alcohol and the way children use alcohol is completely different. However, the result is always the same. Everybody has a low perception of the dangers of alcohol use. But the thing it is, within our culture, we minimize the impact of society. We minimize the impact of the media on alcohol usage. Next slide. And so when we consider, next slide. And so here's some presentation goals. Here's some things that I'm gonna look at and I want you to consider as we move through the presentation. Increase awareness of the knowledge about the impacts of alcohol. 2, understand how to reduce the harmful effects of alcohol misuse. And 3, increase access to community resources. Next slide. So as we go through the presentation, I want you to start thinking, what is going to be my role in this fight to manage alcohol abuse in our country? So here's the $1 million question. Why do people drink? Here's some of the responses that we've heard over the years. It helps me enjoy a party. I use it out of boredom. It helps me forget my problems. It just helps me relax. Maybe I just a little curious. I can't really stop. And I don't really want to feel left out. And so when you look at why people drink, I want you to notice that it runs a full gamut. It runs the gamut between, I don't really want to, going all the way to the other end. I can't help myself. Next slide. And so tonight I want to focus on the health impact, because as we look towards national health, the initiative, some of us have to take responsibility for our health as well. And so let's look at the health impacts. Next slide. What do you think are, go back. What do you think are some immediate risks associated with alcohol use? Next slide. And so here are some of the immediate effects. And COVID-19, you know, we always had a lot of stuff going on. But what COVID-19 did was it made us realize how, as a country, we've existed in so many silos that we didn't really realize how so many of the things were interrelated. When we talk about improving the health of the nation, it's going to call upon multidisciplinary teams from every single government ministry sitting down and saying, well, what would alcohol have to do with us? So I want you to think about it. Alcohol is directly related to violence. Alcohol is directly related to risky sexual behavior. We've seen cases in our country of alcohol poisoning. We've seen unintended injuries, accidents. But one of the biggest ones for me as a child advocate is fetal alcohol syndrome. And so tonight I want us to have a look at overall how alcohol is impacting the health of our nation. Next slide. So let's look at the consequences for a minute. It's so easy for people to simply look at the bum on the side of the road and say, that's rum. But that's not it. That's only a little part of it. We look at people who have breathing problems. We look at people who have problems concentrating on their jobs. We look at people who even went into a coma because of alcohol consumption. But one of the things I want you to also consider is this: alcohol dependency. One of the things I want you to think about is the increased risk for cancers. One of the things I want you to think about is how many women may be raped as a result of alcohol consumption. And so when we look at the consequences of alcohol use, when we focus in on the negative aspect of it, I want you to see how it is ripping apart families. I want you to see how individual lives are being ripped apart, not from regular alcohol consumption, you know, or within limits alcohol consumption, but I'm talking about those people who have alcohol dependencies. So let's have a look at it in a little bit more detail. Next slide. What are some of the consequences? We talked about them already, but let me reiterate. People do things that they later forget. People have memory issues as a result of alcohol consumption. So you may not remember a sexual incident. You may not remember your children. As simple as your children, you may not. Sometimes men who may gamble may not remember that this money in their front pocket is really for the rent, is really for the mortgage, is really to pay a light bill. And I don't want to single out as if it's only men, because no, of course not. We run the full gamut from men and women and children and teenagers having alcohol dependencies. So let's look at it a little closer still. We have people who get in trouble with the police. We have people who injure each other or injure themselves. But one of the other factors is that in many cases when suicide is involved, alcohol is also involved. And so I need us to wake up. I need us to be a little bit more conscious. I need us to seriously think about the health of our nation as we continue going through this PowerPoint. Next slide. So what do you think are some immediate risks associated with alcohol use? Next slide. The immediate risk has to do firstly with our health. Cardiovascular problems, mental health issues, social problems, neurological problems, liver disease, gastric issues, cancers, and the list goes on and on. It's almost as if when you make that decision to become a chronic drinker, you have to realize that that impacts your health directly. And so in many cases, we'll see that persons who are chronic alcohol users also have a lot of health concerns. For me as a psychologist, one of the key ones for me would always be mental health issues. And that has to do with depression. It has to do with anxiety. And it also has to do with a lot of suicidal ideation. And so when we look at the long-term impact of alcohol use, it's kind of scary. It's scary because now you're going to see broken homes, broken families, broken lives. A lot of people, when you talk to them about it, one of the biggest things, next slide, one of the biggest things they say is this: well, I know Tom, and Tom is drinking. I really see nothing wrong with him. Yeah, y'all, some people seem to be all right, but that's what they're showing you on the inside, on the outside. When you go in the inside, you get to see the depression. When you go on the inside, you get to see the broken families. When you go on the inside, you have children who are running away from their mothers or fathers. When you look on the inside, you see in broken people. Let's have a look at the teenage brain. Because whether we like it or not, one of the growing areas of concern in our country is teenage drug use. When we look at the teenage brain, teenagers don't finish growing. Their brain don't finish growing until they're 25. The frontal part of their brain, which is the frontal lobe, that's where all the decision-making, problem solving, critical thinking, that never finishes developing until 25. When I went to college, we always said adolescence end at 18. By that time, the brain was fully developed. New brain-based research indicates no. The brain doesn't stop developing until 25. And so how does that impact alcohol use? Next slide. One of the key things we have to realize is anytime we use any type of drug, next slide, anytime we use any type of drug, I want you to realize that it's almost as if that drug holds the brain at gunpoint because it stops brain development. Have a look at these. These are 2 MRI scans. I think that would be on your left. This brain here. Yeah, that's your left. The brain on your left is a normal brain. All right. That's the brain of a 43-year-old who is progressing well. Notice how you see a lot of white gray area. Notice that the brain seems to be a healthy brain. Then you move over to the other side and you're looking now at the alcoholic brain. Notice how many black spots you see, lack of brain activity. And so notice now, this is the frontal lobe here. This is the front of the brain, the part of the brain responsible for decision-making, problem solving, analytical. This is the part of the brain where that person is able to say, no, I'm not going to shoot somebody. I don't want to embarrass my family. No, I'm not. And notice now, notice in the alcoholic brain, there's a lack of brain activity. That's the scary part. Any drug that is used almost acts as if they're holding the brain at gunpoint. As a result of that, the brain no longer functions the way God intended it to function as a result of drug use. Next slide. And so how does it attack the brain? All right, the first thing it does, remember now I told you point number one, the front part of the brain, that's responsible for decision-making, coordination. Notice, the brain grows from back to front. And so if the brain is hijacked, the information is not going to reach the front of the brain. Someone is not going to sit down and say, you know what, I in the club, this fella step on my foot, I don't need to go fight with him. I mean, he didn't really mean to step on my foot. No, because now the brain is in an emotional state because of alcohol, it is in a heightened emotional state. As a result, people lose control of their emotions. You're going to see loud behavior. You're going to see outbreaks. You're going to see anger, simply because, remember I said the brain goes from the back to the front. And so if we coming up from the back, the brain stops right here in emotions. The information never makes it to the front of the brain. So rather than me being able to think when it gets to the front of the brain and me saying, he didn't mean to step on my foot, he didn't mean to throw the drink on me, I don't need to get upset. No, the brain is now in an emotional state and simply responds to pure emotions. Finally, what else happens with the brain? Point number 3 indicates how heart rate increase, appetite increase, temperature increases. And so not only are we putting the brain in crisis, now we also putting the heart in crisis. Now we infecting other organs. And so when we look at what alcohol does for the brain, I want you to realize one critical thing. To me, the most important thing is losing control of our emotions. Losing control of our emotions. I think that's the most critical thing. And so you see the loudness, you see the outbreaks, you see people leaning towards violent and aggressive behavior. And that's the scary thing for us as well. But one of the things I also want to point out to you is, this is where people make irrational decisions in regards to children. Because of alcohol consumption, people aren't thinking rationally. And so you would have someone who would go and leave their babies at home unattended because they want to go to the bar. You would have a man who would spend the rent money simply because he wants to feel good. He wants to feel happy without considering, how's my family going to eat? Where are we going to stay? And so I need people to understand, when we talk about alcohol dependency, this doesn't just affect me or the person who's drinking. It impacts our country. It impacts national development. It impacts families' ability to make good decisions. It impacts our education system, because children who are growing up in homes with alcoholics have to also manage the emotional outbursts. They have to manage the violence in the home. And so when these kids leave their homes in the morning and they're walking to school, those kids don't enter school prepared for learning. They enter school as angry little people that have learned alcohol is the way to cope with problems. Next slide. And so what influences intoxication? How is it that somebody could drink one Rattler and be knocked out, when somebody could drink a case of Rattler and it doesn't impact them? And that's a whole lot of different factors. You can't ever make an assumption that what alcohol will do for one person, it does to someone else. And so this is a powerful thing even for us to help explain to our children, because in some circumstances, I shouldn't even say children, because I've seen adults engage in this behavior as well, where we go to a party and you say, all right, drink, and then drink some more, and then drink some more. It's so interesting that when you attended college, I mean, this is a bad example, but like attending college in America, I remember going to parties and I see people playing these games with drinking. All right, drink 10 beers. Let me see if I could drink 10 beers. You drink 5 beers, you drink it. And, you know, for some reason as young people, we thought it was funny. But now as an adult, I realize how dangerous that is, because how one person's body would react to alcohol, the next person's body would not. And we've had incidents, we know of incidents even right here in our own country where persons have died because they drank too much. in a binge drinking. And so I want you to take into consideration what are some of the factors that influence intoxication. And it runs the gamut from, did the person eat? It runs the gamut from, what is the person's overall health, the size of their body, the weight of their body, how much alcohol was consumed, what type of alcohol was consumed, but even as simple as male and female. And so next slide, many people, look at alcohol as a game, look at it as part of fun. And I think part of our culture, sadly so, our culture makes alcohol consumption almost like a rite of passage. Our culture makes alcohol consumption as part of the fun. I gave an example when I talked about Grammy. And if some of y'all think about it, it happened to us. Even as little babies, little brandy go inside the bottle. If you get a cold, Grammy might mix up a butter and brandy or some kind of rum mixture to help get the cold out of our bodies. The Bahamas National Drug Council takes a stand, and their stand is, especially for women who are pregnant, not one drop. For 9 months, take not one single drop. Because the truth of the matter is, women's metabolism is completely different from men. And so how alcohol will impact a woman's body is completely different from how it's going to impact a man. Simply because women have less of the enzyme that metabolizes alcohol. Less water in our body. We're generally smaller than men. We have hormonal issues going on. And so as a result of that, it's easier for a female, the average female, it's easier for the average female to get drunk. But what people don't realize, or some people want to forget, is that when you smoke, your baby smokes. When you drink a beer, your baby drinks a beer. And that's where this is another factor that contributes to how alcoholism is impacting national development. Next slide. There is no safe time. Like I said, the Bahamas National Drug Council has a campaign, Baby or the Bottle. And in this campaign, the council seeks to encourage pregnant women take 9 months off from consuming alcohol because a baby should have the opportunity for optimum health, not have to face some of the problems associated with fetal alcohol syndrome. Next slide. We already know that alcohol may cause breast cancer for some women, menstrual abnormalities, adverse pregnancy outcomes, sexually transmitted disease, risk for infertility. But I need to point out to you something else that is even more so dear to my heart. Next slide. And what it is 20% of pregnant women admit to, yeah, I had a little drink while I was pregnant, or yeah, I smoke, or yeah, I vape during pregnancy. What happened? Next slide. And I think it's because, for me, all of our health issues in this country is because we're not educating people enough on it. We're not helping people to understand the full ramifications of it. And so have a look at this for a minute. When a mother drinks, it passes through her body into the bloodstream of her child. And interesting enough, the child's alcohol level is 2 times higher than the mummy's, because it's almost as if as soon as that hits the mother's bloodstream, the rum don't hang up in the mummy's system, it goes straight to the fetus. And so the mummy will not be drunk, but the baby knockout drunk. Some people still don't take that serious. Next slide. But look at what could happen. There are children in our country, y'all, who have fetal alcohol syndrome. Their heads are smaller than what's expected for their birth age, for their chronological age. They have smaller eye openings. They have a low nasal bridge. If you look at this child here, it's almost like he has no bridge. It's just flat right here. Almost, it gives the eyes almost like a mongoloid look. Like you would think that this child has Down syndrome, but it may not be Down syndrome. All right. Basically, the child has a flattened effect right here. Look at the little lips. And that's what fetal alcohol syndrome looks like. And so not only is this child's health challenge, now the child has physical features that are impacting. But I even didn't get to the full part yet. Watch this. Next slide. When we look at fetal alcohol syndrome, there's heart defects. There's mental retardation. The child might be born with cognitive difficulties. All right. The baby may not grow at the same rate as other children. The baby might appear smaller. The child may not thrive. The child may be susceptible to SIDS, going to sleep and just never waking up. It's just so much that I always wonder, why would someone take a chance? And people take a chance because they just don't know. And so I want people to start talking about it. I want people to start saying, I wonder. I want people to say, I never even heard of this before. But we all need to take responsibility to help educate persons to just how dangerous alcohol consumption is. Next slide. And so drinking at any stage of pregnancy impacts the brain's development of the unborn child. And so I already indicated miscarriages, stillbirths, low birth weights. And so your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little drinks during pregnancy could cause a child to be mentally challenged for a whole lifetime. Why not just take 9 months off? Not one drop. Next slide. Not one drop. Next slide. Interesting enough, though, do we think that men cause fetal alcohol syndrome? It's so strange because 10 years ago, the research was pointing and saying, no, fathers have nothing to do with fetal alcohol syndrome. It has to do with the mother. Research today is now saying heavy alcohol use changes the DNA in a man's sperm. And so it's almost like the research keeps changing and we need to stay up to date on it. With any mental problem, not even mental, any health concerns, we have to stay current in terms of what the research is saying about it. And so, like I said, 10 years ago, fetal alcohol syndrome was never linked to the man. However, the research today indicates that men who use a lot of alcohol, their DNA structure is changed. And that, of course, will impact the birth of a new child. All right, next slide. And so if a woman stops smoking before the 16th week of pregnancy, there's no damage to the fetus. But this is not true of alcohol. Straight across the board, 9 months, you must take the 9 months off. Alcohol can damage babies from the beginning straight through to the end. And so that's why one of the major programs of the National Drug Council is not one drop during the 9 months of pregnancy. Continue. Next slide. All right, now look at this word. It's almost as if and y'all think about with COVID-19, it's almost like every day they was making up a new word. So here we go. Drunk, orthorexia. Yeah, right. And so what it means is that there are some people who, rather than eating, they prefer to drink. All right. And so, of course, they're going to get drunk faster. But one of the scariest things about it is alcohol poisoning, where the bloodstream feels just overwhelmed with the amount of alcohol in the system, that it causes people to sometimes just pass out, sometimes to go into a coma. And we've seen it. We've seen the bums that appear to be passed out. But I want people to move away from the idea that it is only a bum thing, because it's not just a bum thing. You have many professional women and men who consume so much alcohol that it just overloads the system and the body just simply shuts down. So you wonder, why do I keep saying that this is a national issue? What happens to the child who comes home from school and needs help with homework and daddy pass out sleeping? What happens to the child who needs to talk to mommy and ask for guidance about managing some boy who keep bothering her at school? And mommy's so caught up in her own life that she doesn't have time. When we look at national development, I want you to understand that alcoholism is impacting the national development of our country, simply because are our children walking to school prepared to learn? Many of them aren't, because they battling the impact of alcoholism in their homes, in their communities, in their families. Next slide. Next slide. And so who knows what alcohol poisoning is? Next slide. Alcohol poisoning occurs when drinking large quantities of alcohol within a short period of time. And we've seen this a lot, that binge drinking where people are drinking 5, 6 drinks, one right after the other, playing this little crazy game, drinking games, chugging, funneling, all that kind of stuff in jest, having a good time. But it does lead to an overload of the system. And in cases, we have seen cases when people have died from alcohol poisoning. They just basically drink themselves to death. Next slide. Next slide. So what are the symptoms? Passing out, where you see people semi-conscious, cold, pale, the skin looks almost bluish, vomiting while sleeping, slow breathing, seizures, even people having issues with urinating. And so sometimes we need to be, vigilant of even family members. We know of family members who may be consuming a whole lot of alcohol. And so you need to be very mindful of these people. Next slide, I think also covers it well. What should you do if you see someone? People put them in the recovery position. Keep their airway clear. And so what you're gonna do is you make sure that they lie down flat, hand underneath the chin. That's gonna allow, if they need to vomit, that vomit will not go back down in their body because their head is slightly elevated. The vomit will be able to come out. All right. Notice now you want the knee in this position, and you have to position them. The knee needs to be in this position. The knee needs to be in this position. So the person, whether they're vomiting, coughing, whatever the case may be, that they don't roll over on their stomach, because then if they aspirate, it could kill them. And so the recovery position is critical, that everyone has an idea what that position looks like. Next slide. And so what do? Call 911. What do? Stay with that person until help arrives. What do you never do? Don't allow the person to sleep it off. And think about it, y'all. That's what we grew up with. Oh, he can sleep it off and he can be all right later on. That isn't what you want. Because that person could easily slip right into a coma and transcend. And so alcohol abuse is a serious matter. It's not something to be taken lightly. And I want you, next slide, and I want you to realize the impact, and I keep saying it because I need you to understand, it leads to broken families. It leads to broken communities. And it is impacting our country in general. One of the things we've also seen an increase in, and even people, parents, I need you to be very mindful, because I noticed the school-age children are also using these energy drinks paired with alcohol. Energy drinks and alcohol are never a good thing, because basically what it leads to is to people being drunk while awake. All right. And it races the heart, causes people to be more aggressive physically and sexually. It's just a recipe for disaster. And so parents, I need you to be more conscious of your children who are using alcohol and energy drinks, and make sure that you steer them away from that type of behavior, simply because it leads to people being awake drunk and people feeling as if they are in a heightened sense, but really they're about to crash, and it could be a dangerous crash. All right, next slide. Next slide. All right, next slide. We can sit through that. Next slide. And so what is it that you could do to reduce your risk? Wait at least 1 hour between drinks. We always tell people about mixing up drinks. And, it's critical that people understand the importance of even eating something substantial even before you start drinking. Make sure for every alcohol beverage, drink at least 1 glass of water. What do I want from you? I want you to go out there and talk about it. Have dialogues. Go to work tomorrow and start saying, well, yeah, yesterday I was the NHL thing and they was talking about, that's what we want. We want you to have conversations about it. Talk about fetal alcohol syndrome. Talk about a pregnant woman should have not 1 drop. Talk about the fact that all of us play a role in what's happening in our country. And alcoholics are not just the bum on the street. But more so than anything, if you have a family member who you feel is an alcoholic, talk to your family doctor. Because sometimes some of the health concerns, we already see the signs that this person may have an issue. We realize that this person doesn't really drink a lot of water, but he sure drink a lot of rum. And so you need to start talking to the doctor so we could start making an intervention in that person's life before their liver is damaged. before they have a heart attack, before the person dies. Let's try and be proactive as we take steps to improve the health of our country. Because in all reality, all of us have to play a role in reaching our ultimate goal of having a healthy Bahamas. Next slide. And so I like to do a little commercial, and my commercial is this. If you feel that there's a family member who is battling any sort of addiction, today we're focusing on alcohol, tomorrow it might be vaping, another day it might be marijuana, another day cocaine, and then we come back to the tobacco industry. In any case, whatever form of addiction you have a family member suffering, help and hope is available through the Bahamas National Drug Council. The number is 387-8550. There is no shame in reaching out for help. The shame comes when somebody dies and you could have done something to save that person. As we seek to create a healthy Bahamas, each one of us have to play a role in creating the better, healthy Bahamas we want. But existing in silence is not the answer. We must share the information and empower other persons to take a stand against drug use and abuse. I think this is the last slide. The floor is now open for questions. Next slide. Thank you. The floor is now open for questions, comments, and even suggestions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carter. That was such a good presentation. I'm going through the chat to see if anyone would have sent messages in terms of questions. Feel free to send a message in the chat or place your question in the chat or to send me a private message. But I had a question, Dr. Carter. So I know today we talked about alcohol and alcoholism, but I just wanted to get their take on the use of the use of alcohol. Does the use of alcohol lead to the use of other substances?
It is a gateway drug to other substances, most definitely. We've seen an increase, of course, of vaping in school children. And so once they get their inhibitions down, then they move into marijuana cookies, then they could move into vaping, then they could move into X, Molly. We've seen it run the full gamut. But also marijuana could be a gateway drug. It's just that alcohol, let me give you an example. You know what? This is the best example. You remember 20 years ago in our country, we couldn't even go in a bar as children. You walk in a bar as a child, even if you come to get ice, somebody would run you out. And I'm so confused in terms of how did our culture change where we have certain restaurants and now where children are in, but now selling food and alcoholic beverages when you know that kids come into these establishments. And so I think we've moved away from those principles that children couldn't even come into places where alcohol was served. And now you have kids hanging out in these places. Now you have kids coming in these establishments where alcohol is sold to buy food. And so I think that's something that we need to look at. It's just our culture has shifted, and I don't know if it's for the betterment. And so, yes, alcohol is a gateway. And as we continue to lax our enforcement of no alcohol or no tobacco products for under 18, we're going to continue to reap the negative effects of that.
Yeah, that is so true. That is definitely true. I remember growing up, Dr. Carter, growing up as a child, like you said, you always shied away from putting your foot into that bar door. When I would visit Harbor Island as a child during the summer months, that was definitely not a place for children. You couldn't even put your head through the door because you knew if an adult saw you and they told your parent or they told my grandparents, you knew what was coming next. And so you just walked past and you went somewhere else for water, you went somewhere else for food, you even went somewhere else for soda or for a juice. So thank you for pointing that out. Just one more question, Dr. Carter, that we received. I know you spoke about some symptoms that are associated with the use of alcohol, but for those individuals that, especially the community, being around our loved ones, being around our friends, what would you say are some warning signs that we can look out for individuals who are battling alcoholism?
You know, one of the most classic ones, and I've seen it even in school age children, and it saddens me a lot, is sometimes that's some people first drink for the morning before you even brush your teeth, before you even give God thanks. First thing you do is you reach for a bottle. That's a red flag. That's a red flag. Something is wrong. All right. The constant fatigue, the constant tiredness, the constant need for a drink. Always when you see someone, they have a cup in their hand. I think we know the signs, but I think sometimes we just try to ignore the signs. All right. When we talk about our school age children, we could smell it on them, but sometimes as parents, you might not even want to touch it. The biggest way for us to fight alcoholism is for us to talk, for it not to be a secret thing anymore, for us to feel confident enough that we can approach family members and say, I think you need help. For parents to not be afraid to say, I don't want to bring that up to my child. Some of these children run these houses, you know. And so parents themselves are afraid to simply say to your child, are you drinking? And some parents are afraid to do that. And so when we look at overall signs, the overall signs are there. We know what the smell of rum on someone's breath is. You notice that your child or your mate now always have mint. Why you always wearing mint? Why you always sucking on a mint? That's a red flag. Not this ain't like an occasional mint, but every minute you look, you saw this person with a mint. You could look in people's eyes. You try and have a conversation. Is the conversation coherent? Is this child always running in their room to lay down? Don't really want to engage in much conversation. Parents need to be mindful of the liquor that they may have around the house. All right. Okay, I know I had a bottle here in the fridge, but that bottle is gone. I mean, allow Sonny if he drank it. Sometimes people don't want to do that because they don't want to confront the issues. And so it's important for people to be real with themselves. And sometimes you have to confront a mate. You have to confront a child, because help and hope is available, but it's only available if you reach out for it. Gone are the days where the bums, the street people are the alcoholics. Some of the alcoholics in our jobs. And let me give you a last example that's going to be real powerful, and you need to understand why we cannot continue to exist in silence when we're talking about alcoholism. What happens to the man who's driving a tractor who's drunk? What happens to the police officer who's speeding down the street drunk? What happens to the pilot driving Bahamas Air who's drunk? Can we afford that? But more so than that, can we afford to have a teacher in the classroom with our children drunk? And so when we exist in silence, national development is impacted. So stand up Bahamas and realize that the health of our country is incumbent upon all of us taking our rightful roles as citizens of this country to whatever sphere of influence we have, to exercise that sphere of influence to create the better Bahamas we want. And so, like I say, help and hope is always available through the Bahamas National Drug Council, 387-8550. And the council takes a public health response to drug prevention, to all substance prevention. So I thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lookie. What a powerful presentation and extremely informative. So we truly, truly appreciate your time this afternoon. But I do have a quick question. If you can share with us quickly before we wrap up some of the services that the National Drug Council offers in terms of, programs for alcoholics or those involved in drug who may need drug treatment, and what other services may be available in country?
All right, the National Drug Council is mandated by government to provide prevention programs, especially for adolescents. However, over the last 4 or 5 years, the council has stretched itself even further. And so the Drug Council serves as a focal point for gender-based violence, because we realize the connection between violence and alcohol or drug use. That's number one. But number two, we also serve as the umbrella organization responsible for treatment facilities. And so when persons need help, regardless of their age, the Drug Council is able to network and to facilitate that person being able to get into treatment facilities countrywide.
Excellent. That's good. That's good to hear. The last comment I have to make before I turn it back over to Chandra is I want to inform everyone on the call this afternoon that the session is being recorded and will be posted on our social media page. So I'm going to encourage all of you to share the recording with your friends and families and colleagues, because I think if you notice, there's probably only about 34 people on. I think we probably did get up to maybe 40, but this is such an important topic. And like Dr. Lookie indicated, all of our families are being affected, and our nation is being affected by this. I would want to call it a epidemic in our country, because that's what it definitely feels like. And so it's all of us have a responsibility to share the word. So please share the recording with your friends and colleagues and family members, and make sure to reach out to the National Drug Council for help for your loved ones who may be suffering from alcoholism or other forms of addiction. Back to you, Chandra.
Thank you for that, Dr. McDonald. And again, to Dr. Carter, Lookie, thank you again for taking your time out, for giving us the gift of your time to present to us on such a nationally prevalent issue that I think we all can do our part to help us overcome. Just a few things that we want to mention as it relates to health and wellness programs that are afforded to our beneficiaries, as well as the Bahamian public at large at the National Health Authority. Every third Thursday, we host our Power Hour, which is a monthly complimentary workout session, which is spearheaded and led by a certified fitness instructor. This is actually an opportunity for families to come out to work out together, to exercise, to get healthier together. And so the exercises and the sessions are geared towards persons of all ages, as well as persons of all fitness levels. If you enjoyed the beneficiary educational session tonight, please stay tuned for our future sessions and continue to share and spread the word. As Dr. McDonald said, these sessions are going to be posted on our social media pages. Feel free to like them. Feel free to continue to watch them, rewatch them, and definitely share them on the social media platforms. And then finally, if you are not a part of our mailing list, please send us an email, because you will be able to be a proud recipient of our wellness newsletter, which is released on a quarterly basis. And I'll share with you our contacts. Should you have further information, or if you have further questions about the NHI Bahamas program, feel free to reach out to us via email, telephone contact, and via social media and on our website. And that information is posted here on our page for you. If you don't remember the information, feel free to log on to Google and type it NHI Bahamas, and all of that information will also be available to you at your fingertips. And so we'd like to take this time again to thank you for giving us the gift of your time and your presence, and for participating in the session. Have a wonderful evening, and we will see you next month.